Out of curiosity, I decided to hide a voice recorder in my husband's car. That night, the moment he walked into the bathroom, I quietly went out to the car, took the recorder, and pressed play. A few seconds later, my blood ran cold. After listening to the recording, I understood one thing. My husband had not betrayed me by accident. He had planned it. My name is Emily Carter, and for 12 years I believed my marriage was ordinary in the way most marriages are ordinary. Not perfect, not tragic, not the kind of thing people whisper about at church or over backyard fences. Jason and I lived in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in a 2-story house with pale blue siding, a porch swing we rarely used, and a maple tree in the front yard that dropped leaves all over the driveway every October. We had a 9-year-old daughter named Lily, a golden retriever who was afraid of thunder, and a refrigerator covered with spelling tests, dentist appointment cards, and magnets from places we always meant to visit again. I taught 3rd grade at a public elementary school. Jason worked as a financial advisor at a private firm downtown. He wore pressed shirts, remembered people's names, and knew exactly how to sound patient when he was correcting someone. To the outside world, he was the kind of husband women praised at dinner parties. He picked up groceries without being asked. He coached Lily's soccer team one spring when no other parent volunteered. He sent flowers to my classroom on our anniversary, always with a card that said something simple and public, something other women could read and sigh over. But in the last few months, something had shifted. It was not one dramatic thing, it was smaller than that and worse because of it. Jason started taking calls in the garage with the door closed. He kept his phone face down on the kitchen counter, even when he was only making coffee. He began leaving early for work, saying traffic was unpredictable, though he had driven the same route for 11 years and knew exactly which streets backed up after 7:30. At night, he would sit in his SUV for 10 or 15 minutes after pulling into the driveway, the engine off, the blue light from his phone glowing against his face. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled without looking at me. "Work stuff," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." That sentence became a wall in our house. Nothing you need to worry about. At first, I tried to believe him, because belief is easier than suspicion, and because women like me are taught to be reasonable. I had papers to grade, lunches to pack, laundry to fold, and a daughter who still wanted me to braid her hair before school. I did not have the energy to become the kind of wife who checked pockets and questioned receipts. I told myself Jason was stressed. I told myself 41 looked different on men than 31. I told myself marriage had seasons, and maybe this was just a cold one. Then, one Saturday morning, while cleaning out the back seat of his SUV, I found a receipt from a restaurant across town. 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine, 1 dessert. Jason had told me that night he was at a client seminar. I stood there in the driveway with the receipt in my hand, the dog barking at a squirrel behind me, and I remember feeling oddly calm. Not devastated, not yet. Just still, the way the air feels before a storm breaks. When Jason came outside, I folded the receipt and slipped it into the pocket of my jeans before he could see it. "What are you doing in my car?" he asked. The question was too quick. "Cleaning," I said. He looked at me for half a second too long, then kissed the top of my head and said, "You're too good to me." That afternoon, I bought a small voice recorder from an office supply store. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself I would hear nothing but talk radio, traffic noise, maybe Jason singing off-key to some old Eagles song. I told myself I would feel embarrassed afterward, and maybe that embarrassment would help me stop imagining things. On Monday morning before he left for work, I slipped the recorder under the passenger seat of his SUV. I went through the rest of the day like a woman moving underwater. I corrected math worksheets. I helped a boy named Caleb stop crying because someone had called his drawing ugly. I smiled at the school secretary when she reminded me about bus duty. All the while, one thought kept circling in my head. By tonight, I would know whether my fear was real. Jason came home at 6:40 with takeout Chinese and a tired smile. Lily ran to him, and he lifted her like he always did, making a show of groaning because she was getting too big. We ate orange chicken from cardboard containers at the kitchen island. He asked Lily about her science project. He asked me about my class. He was charming, attentive, almost too normal. After dinner, he said he was going to take a shower. The moment I heard the bathroom door close and the water start running, I walked downstairs, opened the back door, and stepped into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the SUV. The recorder was still there, tucked under the passenger seat where I had left it. I took it, closed the door carefully, and went back inside. I did not play it in the kitchen. I did not play it where Lily might hear. I went into the laundry room, closed the door, sat on the cold tile floor between a basket of towels and a bottle of detergent, and pressed play. For the first 30 seconds, there was only road noise. Then Jason's voice came through, clear and low. "She has no idea," he said. A woman laughed softly. "You keep saying that, but are you sure?" "I'm sure. Emily still thinks we're just going through a rough patch." I stopped breathing. The woman's voice was smooth, familiar, in a way I could not place at first. Then Jason said her name. Vanessa. Vanessa Reed, his coworker, the woman from his office Christmas party who had complimented my dress while touching my husband's arm. "She found anything?" Vanessa asked. "No," Jason said, "and even if she did, she wouldn't know what she was looking at." There was a pause, then the click of a turn signal. "I moved the second transfer yesterday," Jason continued. "By the time she gets a lawyer, most of the cash will be out of reach." My skin went cold. Vanessa said, "And custody?" Jason laughed once, not loudly, but with a kind of contempt I had never heard from him before. "That's the easy part. She's emotional. Teachers always look stable until you put pressure on them. I've been documenting everything. Her crying, snapping at me, forgetting things. Once I file, I'll push hard, she'll break, and I'll look like the calm parent." My hand flew to my mouth. He was not just leaving me. He was preparing to take Lily. Vanessa said, "That sounds cruel, Jason." "No," he replied. "Cruel would be letting her walk away with half of what I built. She got comfortable. She got soft. She still thinks we're a family." The words landed in me like glass. She still thinks we're a family. I sat there on the laundry room floor while the shower ran upstairs, listening as my husband described my life like a house he had already decided to burn down. He talked about the mortgage, our savings, my retirement account, Lily's school records, even my mother's old medical bills, which he planned to use to make me look financially irresponsible. He mentioned a lawyer. He mentioned timing. He mentioned waiting until after Lily's birthday because, in his words, "It'll make Emily look unstable if she ruins the kid's month." When the recording ended, the laundry room was silent except for the hum of the dryer. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run upstairs and throw the recorder at his face. I wanted to wake Lily, pack a bag, and drive until the house disappeared behind me. Instead, I sat very still. Because somewhere beneath the shock, beneath the humiliation, beneath the terrible grief of hearing the man I loved mock my trust, another feeling began to rise. Not rage. Clarity. I copied the recording onto my laptop. Then I uploaded it to a cloud folder Jason did not know existed. Then I emailed it to myself under a subject line so boring no one would ever open it by accident. Classroom supply notes. When Jason came downstairs 20 minutes later, his hair damp and his face clean, he found me at the kitchen sink rinsing plates. "You okay?" he asked. I turned toward him and smiled. "Yes," I said, "just tired." He believed me. That was his first mistake. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, not because I had slept well, but because I hadn't really slept at all. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Jason breathed steadily beside me, wondering how someone could sound so peaceful after calmly planning to dismantle another person's life. Then I reminded myself of something Attorney Brooks would later repeat many times. Emotion makes mistakes. Preparation wins cases. At that moment, though, I didn't have an attorney. I had only a recording, a terrified heart, and one decision to make. I chose silence. When Jason opened his eyes, I smiled exactly the way I always did. "Morning," I said. He stretched lazily. "Morning. I'll make coffee." "You're the best." Those 4 words almost made me laugh. For 12 years, I had believed kindness was the strongest thing I could bring into a marriage. Overnight, kindness became camouflage. Nothing changed. At least nothing he could see. I packed Lily's lunch. I braided her hair before school. I kissed Jason goodbye at the front door. I waved until his SUV disappeared around the corner. Then I walked back inside, locked the door, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to let the grief move through me before I put it away. By 8:30 that morning, I had made my first appointment. Not with a therapist. Not with a friend. With a family law attorney. I drove across town during my planning period, telling the school secretary I had a medical appointment. The law office occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building overlooking the courthouse. It wasn't glamorous. The furniture was older than I expected, and the receptionist handed me paperwork on a clipboard that had clearly been used for years. A man in his early 60s introduced himself. David Brooks. His handshake was firm but not intimidating. "What brings you here, Mrs. Carter?" For a long moment I couldn't answer. Then I reached into my purse, placed the voice recorder on his desk, and quietly said, "My husband is planning to destroy me." He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. For nearly an hour I explained everything. The strange behavior, the restaurant receipt, the recording, the hidden transfers Jason had mentioned. When I finished, Attorney Brooks leaned back in his chair. "The recording helps," he said carefully. "But it won't win your case by itself." My stomach tightened. "It won't?" "No." He folded his hands. "If your husband really is hiding assets, manipulating evidence, and planning custody fraud, then the recording gives us something far more valuable." "What?" "A roadmap." I frowned. "He told you where to look," Brooks continued. "Most dishonest spouses make one mistake. They think they're smarter than everyone else. Your husband sounds like the type who enjoys explaining how clever he is." I remembered Jason laughing in the recording. "She still thinks we're a family," Brooks continued. "If he believes you're completely unaware, he'll keep making mistakes." "So I pretend?" "You don't pretend." He looked directly at me. "You become the wife he expects." Driving home, I realized my revenge had already changed. It wasn't about humiliating Jason. It was about surviving him. Over the next several weeks, my life split into 2 completely different realities. The first was the one Jason saw. I laughed at his jokes. I thanked him for picking up groceries. I sat beside him at Lily's soccer games, while other parents commented on what a wonderful couple we were. When neighbors invited us over for a barbecue, I held his hand. When his mother called, I chatted pleasantly about holiday plans. If Jason watched me carefully, all he saw was the same Emily he'd always underestimated. The second life existed entirely beneath the surface. Attorney Brooks gave me a checklist. Every task was legal. Every task mattered. Download every joint bank statement. Photograph every tax return. Copy every retirement account. Collect mortgage documents. Save every email discussing finances. Record every unexplained transfer. Never access anything illegally. Never alter anything. Never warn him. I followed every instruction exactly. Jason had always handled our investments. Now I finally understood why. He assumed I would never learn enough to question him. One evening, while he was in the garage talking on the phone, I logged into one of our retirement accounts using information I'd always had, but had never bothered to check. The balance was nearly $200,000 lower than it had been the previous year. There was no explanation. Just transfers. Attorney Brooks wasn't surprised. "He'll have paperwork somewhere." 2 days later, I found it. Not because I searched through Jason's private belongings. Because he'd become careless. He left a folder inside his home office after taking a work call. Normally, the room stayed locked whenever he wasn't inside. That afternoon, he rushed out without realizing the door hadn't latched. Inside the folder were statements from an investment account I had never seen before. The account wasn't in my name. It wasn't even in Jason's. It belonged to an LLC. Attorney Brooks later explained that the company itself wasn't necessarily illegal. The problem was that Jason had funded it using marital assets while pretending those funds no longer existed. The recording hadn't been exaggerating. It had been understating everything. Meanwhile, Jason grew strangely happier. He started humming while making breakfast. He began suggesting family vacations. He even surprised Lily with tickets to a Columbus Crew match, spending the entire evening laughing with her as though he weren't secretly preparing to fight for sole custody. Watching them together hurt more than anything. Because Jason genuinely loved our daughter. I never doubted that. What I doubted was whether he loved winning even more. One Saturday afternoon, Lily and I baked chocolate chip cookies while Jason worked in his office. She looked up from the mixing bowl. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart? Are you and Dad okay?" The spoon stopped in my hand. "What makes you ask?" She shrugged. "You've both been extra nice. Children notice everything." I forced a smile. "We've both been busy." She accepted the answer. I hated myself for lying. That night, after Lily went to bed, Jason poured us each a glass of wine. "To us," he said. I touched my glass to his. "To us." He smiled warmly. "I've been thinking." "Oh?" "I think we're finally getting back to normal." I looked straight into his eyes. "So do I." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The gesture would have meant everything to me a month earlier. Now it meant only one thing. He believed his performance. He believed mine even more. 3 weeks after I met attorney Brooks, Jason came home carrying takeout from my favorite Italian restaurant. "We should celebrate," he said. "What are we celebrating?" He grinned. "Nothing. We ate dinner. We watched television. We put Lily to bed." At 11 that night, after Jason had fallen asleep, my phone vibrated. It was attorney Brooks. Only 4 words. "He's filed for divorce." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was surprised. Because the game had officially begun. The next morning, Jason stood in the kitchen pretending to look confused when a process server knocked on our front door. He read the documents dramatically, as though seeing them for the first time. Then he turned toward me with carefully rehearsed sadness. "Emily," I looked at the papers, then at him, and quietly said, "I expected this." For the first time in weeks, I saw uncertainty flash across his face. It lasted less than a second, but it was there. And I knew then that beneath all his confidence, Jason had never considered one possibility. What if I wasn't the woman he thought I was anymore? Jason recovered quickly. That was one of the things he was good at. He could be startled, embarrassed, even cornered for a second, but he never allowed anyone to see fear for long. By the time Lily came downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes and asking why a strange man had been at the door, Jason had already folded the divorce papers and placed them neatly on the kitchen counter, like they were nothing more than a cable bill. "Grown-up paperwork," he said lightly. Lily looked at me. I smiled because I had to. "Go brush your teeth, honey. I'll make pancakes." She disappeared upstairs, and the moment her footsteps faded, Jason lowered his voice. "I didn't want you to find out like this." The performance was almost impressive. I turned on the stove. "How did you want me to find out?" He sighed as if I had disappointed him by asking the obvious question. "I was going to talk to you this weekend, calmly, like adults." I poured batter into the pan and watched it spread into a circle. "Of course." He studied my face, searching for cracks. "Emily, I know this hurts." I flipped the pancake. "No," I said, "you don't." His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Not yet. He still believed he had time. He still believed I would fall apart when the shock settled in, and he needed me to fall apart, because the version of me he had built for his case depended on it. So I gave him nothing. Not anger. Not tears. Not even a raised voice. Over the next few days, Jason became the most reasonable man in Ohio. He told our neighbors we were working through a painful transition. He told his mother we both wanted what was best for Lily. He told the soccer parents that divorce was hard, but children came first. He said all of it with that steady, sorrowful tone people trusted, while I stood beside him and let him believe he was writing the story. Attorney Brooks called it controlled exposure. "You don't correct every lie," he told me. "You let him commit to them." "That feels dangerous." "It is dangerous," he said. "But careless people reveal themselves when they think no one is keeping score." So I kept score. Jason filed a temporary custody motion claiming I was emotionally unstable, overwhelmed by work, and prone to angry outbursts. He described me as forgetful, unpredictable, and unable to provide Lily with consistent emotional security. Reading those words felt like being erased and replaced by a stranger wearing my face. Attached to the motion were screenshots of text messages I had sent during stressful moments, but he had stripped away the context. One said, "I can't do this anymore." He presented it as evidence that I could not handle motherhood. In reality, I had written it after 12 hours of school conferences, while Lily had the flu and Jason was supposedly stuck at work. Another message said, "I feel like I'm losing my mind." He used that one too. I remembered the night clearly. My mother had been in the hospital, Lily had cried over a math test, and Jason had gone silent for 3 hours after promising to come home early. He had not been documenting my instability. He had been creating it. For one whole evening, I sat in my car outside a grocery store and let myself shake. Not because I wanted to give up, but because fury needed somewhere to go. Then I wiped my face, bought milk, eggs, bananas, and the cinnamon cereal Lily liked, and drove home. Jason was waiting in the kitchen. "Rough day?" he asked. I set the groceries on the counter. "Normal day." He looked almost disappointed. 2 weeks later, Attorney Brooks showed me Jason's financial disclosure. According to the documents, Jason had far less money than we knew he had. The investment account tied to the LLC was missing. So were 2 transfers, a bonus payment, and the proceeds from a stock sale he had told me years ago was just paperwork. "He signed this?" I asked. Brooks nodded. "Under penalty of perjury?" "Yes." I stared at the page. For the first time since hearing the recording, I felt something close to satisfaction. "Does that help us?" "It helps more than the recording ever could." Jason did not know it, but every move he made after filing became cleaner evidence than anything he had said in the car. Words can be explained away. Paper trails cannot. He also began making mistakes with people. Vanessa made the first one. She sent an email from her work account to Jason's personal address with the subject line, "Updated projections." The attachment was a spreadsheet showing how certain assets could be protected before settlement. Jason forwarded it to an account Attorney Brooks had already subpoenaed, probably without realizing the original metadata would remain intact. When Brooks told me, he almost smiled. People think deleting something makes it disappear. Does it? Not when they're this sloppy. The second mistake involved Lily. Jason started asking her questions that sounded casual but were not. "Does Mom cry a lot when I'm not home? Does Mom forget to make dinner? Does Mom ever say bad things about me?" Lily told me because she was 9 and because guilt sits strangely on children. One night, while I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Am I supposed to tell Dad things about you?" I felt my heart crack quietly down the middle. "No, sweetheart," I said, brushing hair from her forehead. "You are not responsible for grown-up problems. He said he just wants to make sure you're okay." "I know." "Are you okay?" I kissed her temple. "I'm doing my very best." That was the truest answer I could give. The next morning I told Attorney Brooks. He advised me to document it and request a child therapist, not as a weapon, but as protection. That distinction mattered. Revenge, if it was going to mean anything, could not use Lily the way Jason had tried to use her. So Lily began seeing a therapist named Dr. Henson, a warm woman with silver glasses and a waiting room full of puzzles. Jason agreed because refusing would look bad, and because he still believed professionals would see what he wanted them to see. They didn't. Dr. Henson later noted that Lily felt pressured by her father's questions and worried about choosing the right answer. She did not blame Jason outright. She didn't need to. The truth was careful, and sometimes careful truth is the most devastating kind. As the court date approached, Jason became bolder. He moved out temporarily, renting a sleek apartment downtown with exposed brick and no child's toothbrush in the bathroom. He posted photos of himself at charity lunches. He called Lily every night at exactly 7, always cheerful, always loud enough for me to hear how loving he sounded. Then, one Thursday evening, I received a second recording. Not from a device. From Jason himself. He had called Vanessa from the driveway, and his phone had accidentally connected to the Bluetooth speaker in the living room, where Lily and I had been sorting laundry. His voice filled the room before I could stop it. "She's exactly where I want her," he said. Lily froze. I turned the speaker off so fast my hand hurt. But the sentence had already entered the house. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down everything I remembered. Time, date, exact words, Jason's tone, Lily's reaction. Then I sent it to Attorney Brooks. His reply came back 10 minutes later. "Good, do nothing." So I did nothing. I went to work. I helped children learn multiplication. I signed field trip forms. I smiled at parents in the pickup line. And every night, I came home to a house that felt quieter, emptier, and somehow stronger. Jason thought silence meant weakness. But silence had become my evidence room. By the time we walked into court for the temporary hearing, he had built the perfect trap for me. He just didn't understand that he was standing in the middle of it. The courthouse smelled like old paper, floor polish, and coffee that had been sitting too long. I remember that more clearly than I remember what I wore. Jason arrived 15 minutes after I did, walking beside his attorney with the relaxed confidence of a man who believed procedure was only a formality. He wore a navy suit, a pale blue tie, and the same expression he used at parent-teacher night when other fathers asked him about college savings plans. Calm, reasonable, slightly wounded but brave about it. Vanessa was not there. Not yet. Attorney Brooks sat beside me, setting his leather folder on the table with careful hands. He had told me not to stare at Jason, not to react to his testimony, and not to whisper unless something was truly urgent. Courtrooms did not reward emotion, he said. They rewarded records. So I folded my hands in my lap and looked straight ahead. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The hearing began with Jason's attorney painting a picture of a troubled home. He described me as a loving mother who had recently become overwhelmed, emotionally reactive, and unreliable. He did not sound cruel while doing it. That was the worst part. He sounded sympathetic, almost gentle, as if he were trying to save Lily from a tragedy I had created. Jason sat with his eyes lowered. "Perfect." Then he testified. He said I had become distant. He said I cried often. He said I forgot appointments. He said he worried about Lily being exposed to emotional instability. He spoke softly, pausing at just the right moments, and if I had not heard the recording myself, I might have believed he was heartbroken. His attorney handed him printed copies of my texts. Jason read one aloud. "I can't do this anymore." Then he looked toward the judge. "That scared me," he said, "as a father." Something inside me twisted, but I did not move. Attorney Brooks wrote one word on his legal pad. Context. When it was his turn, he rose slowly. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you testified that Mrs. Carter's message concerned her ability to parent, correct?" "Yes." "You were aware that message was sent the night your daughter had the flu?" Jason's face stayed composed. "I believe so." "And you were also aware Mrs. Carter had completed a full day of parent conferences, taken your daughter to urgent care, picked up medication, and contacted you several times because you had promised to come home early?" Jason adjusted his tie. "I was working." "Were you?" "Yes." Brooks picked up a document. "Your phone location records show you were at a restaurant called Mason and Vine for 2 hours and 13 minutes that evening." Jason's attorney objected. Brooks explained calmly that the records were relevant because Jason had introduced the text message without context. The judge allowed it. For the first time, Jason looked at me. I gave him nothing. Brooks continued carefully, patiently, not attacking Jason all at once, but removing one brick after another. The forgotten appointments Jason mentioned had been rescheduled by Jason himself. The emotional outbursts were texts sent during moments when he had disappeared, lied, or failed to show up for responsibilities he had agreed to share. The financial irresponsibility included medical payments for my mother that came from our joint account with Jason's approval. Then Brooks turned to the money. The room changed. Bank statements appeared. Transfer records appeared. Tax documents appeared. An LLC Jason had failed to disclose appeared. My husband's calm began to thin. "And, Mr. Carter," Brooks said, "did you transfer marital funds into an entity called Northline Advisory Holdings?" Jason blinked. "That is a business account." That was not my question. "My finances are complicated." "I imagine they are." A few people in the gallery shifted. Brooks handed him another document. "Is this your signature on the financial disclosure submitted to this court?" "Yes." "And on that disclosure, did you list Northline Advisory Holdings?" Jason was quiet for half a second too long. "No." "Why not?" "My attorney prepared the paperwork." Jason's attorney stiffened. Brooks nodded as if that answer interested him. "So your testimony is that the omission was your attorney's mistake?" "I'm saying I relied on counsel." Brooks paused, then turned one page. "Did your attorney also advise you to move $200,000 in marital assets 11 days before filing for divorce?" Jason's mouth opened, then closed. There it was. Not defeat. Exposure. Brooks did not play the recording then. He didn't need to, not yet. He called the bank records. He called the subpoenaed emails. He called the spreadsheet Vanessa had sent from her work account, the one labeled Updated Projections. Jason tried to explain it as routine financial planning, but the words on the page were colder than any accusation. Protected before settlement. Minimize exposure. Delay discovery. The judge read silently for a long moment. Jason looked smaller in his expensive suit. Then the court heard from Dr. Henson. She did not condemn him, she did not dramatize. She simply testified that Lily had expressed anxiety about answering questions from her father, and that she seemed afraid her answers might hurt one parent or help the other. That was when I finally saw something break in Jason's expression. Not because he felt guilty, because he realized using Lily had not worked. After a short recess, Jason was called again. His attorney tried to repair the damage. Jason leaned into his best voice, the wounded, responsible father voice. "I have never tried to hurt Emily," he said. "I only wanted to protect my daughter and preserve what I worked hard to build." Brooks stood. "Mr. Carter, did you ever make a plan to convince this court that your wife was unstable?" "No." "Did you ever discuss moving assets so she would not have access to them?" "No." "Did you ever say that once Mrs. Carter hired a lawyer, most of the cash would be out of reach?" Jason's eyes flicked toward me. "No." Brooks reached for the small device on the table. My chest tightened. I had imagined this moment for weeks, but imagination had not prepared me for the sound of my husband's voice filling the courtroom. "She has no idea," Jason said from the recording. The room went silent. Vanessa's voice followed. "You keep saying that, but are you sure?" "I'm sure. Emily still thinks we're just going through a rough patch." Jason's attorney closed his eyes. The recording continued line by line, cold and exact. "I moved the second transfer yesterday. By the time she gets a lawyer, most of the cash will be out of reach." No one moved. Then came the part that took the air from the room. "She's emotional. Teachers always look stable until you put pressure on them. I've been documenting everything. Her crying, snapping at me, forgetting things. Once I file, I'll push hard, she'll break, and I'll look like the calm parent." The judge looked at Jason. Jason looked nowhere. When the worst line came, I did not cry. "She still thinks we're a family." I sat perfectly still. Because that woman on the recording, the one he had mocked, no longer existed. Brooks stopped the audio before it could become spectacle. He did not smile, he did not gloat. "Your Honor," he said, "Mrs. Carter is not asking this court for revenge. She is asking for protection, disclosure, and a custody arrangement that does not reward manipulation." That sentence mattered to me, because by then, I understood the difference. Revenge would have been screaming at Jason in our kitchen. Justice was making him answer under oath. The judge ordered a full forensic review of the finances, limited Jason's unsupervised decision-making regarding Lily until further evaluation, and warned him that failure to disclose assets would carry serious consequences. Temporary primary custody stayed with me. Jason was granted parenting time, but with strict boundaries about discussing the case with our daughter. When the hearing ended, Jason stood slowly. For the first time in our marriage, he had nothing to say. Outside the courtroom, he caught up to me near the elevators. "Emily," he said. I turned. His face was pale. "You recorded me." I looked at the man who had planned my ruin, and I felt no need to raise my voice. "No, Jason," I said. "You recorded yourself." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside with Attorney Brooks, and as the doors closed, I saw Jason standing there alone, finally understanding that the weapon he had feared most was not my anger. It was his own truth. The weeks after the hearing did not feel like victory. That surprised me. For so long, I had imagined that if Jason were exposed, if the judge heard what I had heard, if everyone finally saw the man behind the careful smile, then some enormous weight would lift from my chest and I would be able to breathe like I used to. But justice does not erase damage. It only stops the bleeding. Jason moved out of the downtown apartment 3 months later, after the forensic accountant finished tracing the transfers. The money had not vanished as cleanly as he thought. Some of it sat inside North Line Advisory Holdings. Some had moved through accounts connected to Vanessa. Some had been used to pay retainers, rental deposits, and expenses he never reported. The accountant found patterns Jason could explain in charming language, but not in lawful language. His firm placed him on leave first. Then he resigned. Vanessa lost her job after the emails surfaced, though I never learned whether she left willingly or was pushed out. Part of me wanted to hate her forever, and for a while I did. But hatred is exhausting when you are also packing lunchboxes, meeting with lawyers, and trying to help a child understand why her father no longer comes inside the house. Jason did not go to prison, not in the dramatic way people imagine when they want a clean ending. Real life rarely ties a ribbon around pain that neatly. But he paid. He lost credibility in court. He lost his professional reputation. He lost control over the story. The hidden funds were brought back into the marital estate, and the final settlement reflected every lie he had told. I kept primary custody of Lily. The house was sold, and Jason's parenting time continued under strict conditions until Dr. Henson felt Lily was no longer being pressured. The day the divorce became final, I sat in my car outside the courthouse with both hands on the steering wheel. Attorney Brooks had already left. The parking lot was half empty. A woman in red heels walked past me carrying a file box. A man in a work shirt smoked beside an old pickup truck. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rang noon. I expected to feel powerful. Instead, I felt tired. Then I looked at the passenger seat, where the final decree rested in a plain manila envelope, and I realized tired was not the same as broken. I had survived. That was enough for that day. Lily and I moved into a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood, one with a narrow kitchen, creaky floors, and a backyard just big enough for the dog to chase tennis balls. We bought a used dining table from a retired couple in Westerville, and Lily chose yellow curtains for her bedroom because she said she wanted the mornings to look happy. I let her choose. In the first few months, she asked careful questions. "Is Dad a bad person?" I never answered quickly. "He made bad choices," I said. "Really bad?" "Yes, sweetheart, really bad." "Do I still have to love him?" That question nearly broke me. I sat beside her on the edge of her bed and took her small hand in mine. "You never have to force your heart to feel anything," I told her. "But loving someone does not mean pretending they didn't hurt people, and being hurt by someone does not mean you have to become cruel." She thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "I don't want to be like him." I kissed her forehead. "Then tell the truth even when it costs you." Jason changed after the divorce, though not all at once, and not in a way that made everything okay. At first, he was angry. He sent messages through the parenting app that sounded polite enough for a judge, but sharp enough for me to feel the blade. He complained about money. He accused me of turning Lily against him. He asked for favors as if he had earned them. I answered only what needed answering. No more. No less. Over time, his messages grew shorter, maybe because the fight had left him, maybe because he understood there was no audience anymore, maybe because losing is the only teacher some people respect. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Jason came to pick Lily up for dinner. He stood on the porch holding a small paper bag from the bakery she liked. I opened the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked older. Not ruined, exactly, but diminished, as if the version of himself he had performed for so long had finally become too heavy to carry. "Emily," he said quietly. I waited. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he continued, looking past me toward the yellow curtains in Lily's room upstairs. "But I'm sorry for what I did. There had been a time when I would have needed that apology like water. By then I did not. Still, I heard it." "I hope you mean that," I said. "I do." "I hope you prove it to Lily." His eyes dropped. "I'm trying." That was the closest thing to mercy I could offer him. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. Just the door left open for him to become less harmful than he had been. Lily came running down the stairs in sneakers and a denim jacket, her ponytail bouncing. She hugged me first, then walked to him. Jason smiled at her carefully, almost humbly, and for the first time in years he did not look like a man trying to win. He looked like a father trying not to lose any more than he already had. After they left, I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and watered the basil plant on the windowsill. Ordinary things, beautiful things, the kind of life I had once taken for granted. That night, after Lily came home and fell asleep, I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. The voice recorder was still there. Small. Black. Harmless looking. It had saved me, but I did not want to build a shrine to pain. I did not want the rest of my life to orbit around the worst thing I had ever heard. So I held it in my palm for a while, remembering the laundry room floor, the hum of the dryer, the sound of Jason's voice saying, "I still thought we were a family." Then I removed the batteries. The next morning I dropped the recorder into a donation bin with old chargers, broken phones, and outdated electronics. I did not need it anymore. The truth had already done its work. Some betrayals begin with a kiss, a secret dinner, or a lie whispered in the dark. But the worst betrayals begin when someone decides your trust makes you easy to destroy. Jason thought my silence meant weakness. He thought my kindness meant ignorance. He thought that because I loved my family, I would never fight for myself. He was wrong. I did not destroy him. I simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own choices. And sometimes, that is the fairest revenge of all. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on this. Would you have confronted Jason the night you heard the recording? Or would you have stayed silent and waited for the truth to become undeniable? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe stories like this can teach us something about love, trust, and self-respect, please subscribe and stay with us for